The Maple Grove Medical Center in Massachusetts was the kind of place where silence settled into the walls. In the heart of autumn, the trees outside blazed in red and gold, but inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and unspoken prayers. Claire Bennett, 27 years old and newly assigned to the night shift, had handled trauma, codes, and difficult patients since graduating from nursing school 2 years ago. But something about tonight felt different. She had barely finished reviewing her patient list when a nurse tapped her on the shoulder. "Dr. Langston wants to see you, now." Claire followed the hallway to the corner office. Dr. Roger Langston, head of neurology, was known for being sharp, unshakable, and rarely emotional. He didn't greet her when she entered. He was standing by the window, looking out into the dark treetops. "We have a patient who requires dedicated care," he said, without turning around. "Okay," Claire replied cautiously, unsure what this was about. "It's not a standard case. The patient is stable but unresponsive. 6 months in a coma. We need someone consistent, someone who will treat him as a person, not a chart." Claire remained silent. Finally, Langston turned and handed her a thick folder. A photo clipped to the front caught her eye. A crushed sports car. A face she recognized. Elliot Kane. She exhaled. "You mean Elliot Kane, the venture capitalist?" "Yes, multimillionaire, tech investor, 33 years old, car accident on I-95, his brakes failed, he barely made it out alive." Langston's voice dropped. "But he hasn't woken up since." Claire turned the page slowly, reading the summary of injuries, scans, daily notes. "He has no family close by, no visitors, but someone is paying a lot of money to keep him in that suite." Langston's tone changed slightly. "I want you to take over his care, full-time." Claire hesitated. It was a huge responsibility, but something about the photograph, a flicker in his eyes, the look of someone mid-sentence stayed with her. "I'll do it," she said. Room 417 was unlike any other patient room in the hospital. Soft gray walls, oak floors, and a private view of the woods behind the east wing. No humming fluorescent lights, no interruptions, just one man lying perfectly still. Claire stepped inside and stood by the bed. Elliot Kane was motionless, his face pale but striking. Strong jawline, dark lashes. If not for the monitors and the IV lines, he might have looked like a man asleep in a hotel suite. She adjusted his chart, checked his vitals, and began the delicate process of bathing him. Warm water, clean cloths, gentle movements. As she leaned in to wipe his collarbone, she whispered quietly, not expecting any answer. "You probably don't care who I am, but I'm going to be here. Every day." No response. She changed the linens, repositioned his legs, adjusted the head of the bed. It was all mechanical, procedural. But when she touched his hand to adjust the pulse oximeter, a faint chill ran up her spine. It wasn't the air, it was something else. She looked down at him. "You felt that, didn't you?" The monitors continued to beep steadily. Still, something inside her shifted, and from that moment on, Claire spoke to him every night. 3 days later, while fluffing Elliot's pillow, Claire froze. His hand had moved. Just slightly. Just enough. She leaned down, her heart pounding, and stared at the motionless hand. "Did you just?" "Nothing. Only silence." The next night, it happened again. She was wiping down his arm when she felt a faint squeeze on her wrist. This time, she didn't hesitate. She pressed the nurse call button and asked for Dr. Langston. "You're sure?" he asked, skeptical. "Yes. It wasn't a spasm. I've seen involuntary movement. This wasn't that." He agreed to run a scan. 2 days later, the results came in, mild but noticeable increase in neural activity. "It doesn't mean he's waking up," Langston said carefully, "but it's promising." Claire returned to room 417 that night with a new sense of hope. She sat by his bed. "I think you're in there somewhere," she said softly. "And I think you've been listening." She told him about the hospital cafeteria, about her annoying neighbor, about her dream to one day run a hospice for people who had no one. She did not realize that deep inside the quiet of his mind, Elliot Kane was hearing every word. It was a Wednesday morning when it happened. Claire arrived early. The sky outside room 417 was still blue-gray, and the hospital was quiet, except for the occasional squeak of rubber soles on tile. She rolled up her sleeves and began her routine like always warm basin, clean towel, gentle care. "You know, Elliot," she said, dipping the towel into water, "I've been thinking about getting a dog. At least he'd wag his tail when I talk." She smiled to herself, wiped his chest, then moved to his left arm. And then he squeezed her hand. Not a twitch, not a spasm. A slow, weak, intentional grip. Claire's eyes widened. She froze. Her pulse roared in her ears. "Elliot," she whispered. Then his eyelids fluttered. Once, twice. They opened. Ocean-colored eyes met hers, glassy and dazed but aware. Claire couldn't breathe. "Elliot," she said again, more certain this time. He looked around, confused. His mouth parted, and a hoarse, dry whisper came out. "Where?" She nearly dropped the basin. She backed up quickly and hit the call button on the wall. The alarm blared. Seconds later, a team of doctors and nurses flooded the room. Dr. Langston led the charge, his face transforming from shock to urgency. "He's awake," Claire said, voice shaking. He grabbed my hand. He spoke. Monitors beeped faster. Lights blinked. Hands worked. Claire stepped back as the team moved in. But even in the chaos, Elliot's eyes found hers again, and this time he didn't look away. Over the next few days, Elliot spoke more. His voice was rough, sentences short, mind foggy. His body, after 6 months of stillness, trembled with every small movement. He could eat with help, sit up with assistance, but he still remembered nothing before the crash. Claire stayed by his side. Not always talking, sometimes just being there. Dr. Langston asked questions daily. "Do you remember what happened that night?" Elliot frowned. Flashes. Lights. He rubbed his temples, frustrated. "There was something wrong. I felt it before I crashed. The brakes," he paused, "they didn't work." Claire's body stiffened. She had read his case. The report said brake failure, but no further investigation had been opened. Later that evening, alone in the nurse's office, she opened the internal archives again. Cross-checked the report. This time, she read line by line. And there it was. Brakes were tampered with. Intentional sabotage. Claire's breath hitched. Someone had tried to kill Elliot Kane. And he had no idea. Elliot's physical recovery was remarkable. 2 weeks later, he could stand, speak fluidly, even take short walks with support. But his mind remained a patchwork. Claire debated whether to tell him. She didn't want to overload him, but she also knew the danger might not be over. So one afternoon, when the hallway was quiet and the garden window glowed with late sunlight, she sat down beside him and laid out the file. "Elliot," she began, her voice low, "I think someone tried to kill you." He turned toward her, brows furrowed. She showed him the tampered brake analysis. A week before the crash, an anonymous bank transfer had been made day to a known mechanic with a criminal record. The sender? Asher Kane, Elliot's older brother. Elliot stared at the name, his jaw tight. "He always hated that I ran the company," he said quietly. "Dad made me CEO. He thought it was unfair." Claire watched him absorb the truth, piece by piece. "What are you going to do?" Elliot's voice was steady. "I'm going to find out exactly what he did. Then I'm going to make sure he never hurts anyone again." The meeting took place in the library of the Kane family Estadia cold room lined with old books and untouched antiques. Claire stood beside Elliot as the double doors creaked open. Asher Kane entered, confident and smug, dressed in a tailored gray suit, his smile forced and eyes calculating. "Well," Asher said, "look who came back from the dead." Elliot didn't blink. "Cut the games, I know everything." Asher poured himself a drink. "You always were dramatic." Claire stepped forward. "You wired money to a known criminal, the man who tampered with Elliot's car." Asher's smile faded. "You have no proof." "I do," Elliot said, pulling a small flash drive from his pocket. "Bank statements, email exchanges, testimony from the mechanic, it's over." Asher's voice turned sharp. "You think this changes anything? You think anyone will believe a guy who's been in a coma for 6 months?" The door opened behind them. 2 officers stepped in. "Actually," one said, "we believe him just fine." Asher turned white. "You set me up." Elliot stepped closer. "No, you set yourself up when you tried to erase me." The officers read Asher his rights and escorted him out. He shouted threats over his shoulder, but Elliot didn't react. Only when the door slammed shut did Elliot finally let out a long breath. Justice, long overdue, had arrived. That evening, back at the hospital, the air felt different. Lighter. Claire found Elliot sitting in the garden, wrapped in a gray sweater. The moonlight cast soft shadows across the stone path. He turned to her as she approached. "You stayed," he said. "Of course I did. You didn't have to." Claire shook her head. "You weren't just a patient. You were something more. Even when you couldn't speak, I felt like you were still there." Elliot stood slowly, walked toward her, and stopped inches away. "I don't remember who I was before the accident, but I know who I want to be now." Claire looked into his eyes. "I'm not rich anymore, not fully recovered, not the man I used to be." "Good," she said gently. "That man didn't know how to be loved." He smiled, and then he said it words so quiet they almost disappeared into the wind. "I love you, Claire." She stepped forward and took his hand. "I love you too." 6 months passed. Elliot regained full control of his life and his company, but he no longer drowned in work or numbers. He spent more time walking in the city park, reading, laughing, learning how to live again. And always Claire was by his side. One spring evening, on the rooftop of a quiet downtown restaurant, Elliot took her hand, dropped to one knee, and asked the question that had been burning in his heart since the day he woke up. "Will you marry me?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. 100 times, yes. The wedding was held beneath tall oak trees behind Maple Grove Medical Center, the place where it all began. Staff and friends gathered. Even Dr. Langston smiled. Claire wore a simple ivory dress. Elliot stood in a navy suit, no longer the man who lay silent in room 417, but someone transformed by loss, truth, and love. Their vows were not grand, but honest. "I will never leave your side," Claire said. "You never did," Elliot replied. As they kissed, the crowd clapped and cheered, but the world seemed to fall silent for them alone. In the end, the story of Elliot and Claire wasn't about a billionaire waking up from a coma. It was about what happens when someone refuses to give up on you, and how that can change everything.